Okay, this is AP World History Unit 3 test review here. A shorter test, only got about 30 questions here, you know, ranging in topics from the Byzantines to the Muslims to Tang and Song China. A few questions that cover Middle Age Europe as well. So let's get into it. So when we talk about religions, we talk about Christianity and Islam being two very important major religions in this time period. We need to understand that while there are some differences, there are also quite a few similarities. One of those major similarities is that both of these are monotheistic. They have a belief in a single omnipotent deity, whether it's Allah for the Muslims or God for the Christians. That this is one of their biggest similarities, of course. And speaking of the Muslims, when you talk about the Abbasid and the Umayyad dynasties that take place there with the Muslims, that they go through a scientific and literary golden age, and it's really especially with the Abbasids than the Umayyads, who remember the Umayyads favored the Arab military aristocracy, but when the Abbasids come in and take over, that it's much more diverse, and that this cultural diversity that the Islamic governments are accepting is going to help lead to this scientific and literary golden age. In the Byzantines, we talk about Byzantines. We usually, if it isn't Justinian, we're talking about, it's usually Theodora we're talking about, and she was a very powerful woman, of course, but she was not the dominant political figure of her age. I mean, her husband still ran the place. She was a co-ruler. She was an advisor in age. She was the daughter of a bear keeper in the circus. She's even a former stripper. She probably gets her biggest claim to fame by advising him to crush a riot in Constantinople, the Nika revolt. But she's not controlling the empire from behind the scenes. Justinian's still in control. So don't make that mistake when you think of Theodora. Again, going back towards religions here, in this time period, you have people following the Vedas, which is the Hindus. You have the New Testament, of course, which is the Christians. You have the Analects, which is Confucianism, and you have the Eightfold Path that exists for Buddhists. You also have the Quran for the Muslims, and it's the newest out of all the major religions. Islam is the newest, coming out in basically the 600s CE. So all the other ones named are older than Islam. And speaking of Islam, again, we talk about the inroads that Islam made into Africa and the influence that Muslims had on Africa. One of the people influenced by Islam, of course, was the richest man in history, Mansa Musa. And this is a guy from Mali, that is majorly influenced by the Muslims. He goes on a Hajj where he basically just throws out gold and, kind of causes the economy to crash in several countries because of inflation, because for him, gold is easy to get his hands on. He just has more of it than he even needs. But it also shows that Islam had a major influence on the Mali Empire and other African empires as well. Let's see. We talk about, let's break apart Christianity just a little bit here. What begins as mostly Roman Catholicism, with the dividing of the Roman Empire and the moving of the capital to the east, you start getting the emergence of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is a little bit different. You also and these obviously they're different, but they have a major cultural identity that they share, and a lot of that could be shared with Muslims as well. Now they're a little bit different than, say, Zoroastrians, who are monotheistic, but other than that, really don't share too much cultural heritage. There's some ideas, Judgment Day, the idea of heaven and hell that Zoroastrians have, but other than that, the other three really share a lot more religious heritage with each other. The Arabic language, when the Islamic conquests are taking over so much of the world, and they build up that enormous empire, Arabic's going to become that language that helps unify this diverse region and brings the people together. They're all under Muslim power, and now they're going to be speaking a common language, if you will, speaking Arabic as a common language, the language of the Quran. Um, the Tang Dynasty, when we talk about the Tang and remember how large it was, um, it saw Buddhism as a threat. It was based the Tang bureaucracy was based off of the Confucian merit system. And Buddhism seen as a threat because it offers a different alternative to social organization. It's just something different, and so the Tang bureaucracy is going to view Buddhism as certainly a major threat. The Byzantine Empire. When you talk about the Byzantine Empire, and were they Romans or not Romans? One of the biggest legacies that they leave is their getting Russia to convert to Orthodox Christianity. Remember that Prince Vladimir of Russia, sends out missionaries or I don't guess I'd call them missionaries, but sends out scouts basically looking for religions to adopt. They were properly impressed by the Hagia Sophia. They come back and tell him about it. And he decides that's going to be his religion. And he's going to baptize 3,000 people in the Dnieper River, 3,000 Russians. And, to this day, the vast majority of Russians are Orthodox Christians. So that's probably one of the biggest legacies of the Byzantine Empire. Comparisons between Islam and Chinese empires in this post-classical period. The thing that they share probably the most of is that both of them are very urbanized. They have large cities. This is not like Europe, which is mostly rural, but they have large cities and they have a lot of sea trade. The Muslims have advanced maritime technology. The Chinese have advanced maritime technology, and they certainly share those characteristics. And the Byzantines, they're maintaining political unity for the most part through making these marriages and arranging diplomatic alliances. That's what they're doing. And then we get the development spread of Christianity and Buddhism. Does a lot of things. Both Christianity and Buddhism were outgrowths of other religions. They were influenced by other religions. Both were aided in their spread by the trade networks, Silk Roads. Both of them developed monasteries. Both Christianity and Buddhism have monks. And both venerated people of high spiritual merit. However, one small key difference is that with Christianity, Jesus is going to be seen as divine, whereas in at least the original Buddhism, Buddha is not seen as divine. So there's a key difference between Christianity and Buddhism. In India, you get something called the Book of Wonders, and all it was is this, tall tale collection. It's these collection of stories that are exaggerated that come out of other lands. Also in India, it's a tough place climate-wise. They rely on dams and canals, reservoirs, irrigation systems. They got to have these monsoon systems because it's tough weather. The one thing that they really don't have that you see in Japan and China, Korea, Vietnam is the terrace farming. In India, they don't really ever make use of terrace farming. Just keep that in mind. Now, India is a place that becomes well known. It's for luxury items, spices, gems, cotton. Of course, silk's coming from China, but China's basically like silk and porcelain. But you get spices, gems, and cotton coming from India, which are pretty good, pretty lucrative items. Speaking of China, you talk about the massive Tang dynasty, and they institute something called the equal field system. And basically what they did was they would give you an amount of land according to how good was the land. Was it very fertile? If it wasn't very fertile, then you got more land. If it was very fertile, then you wouldn't need as much land. How big was your family? What were your needs? So that's how they would allot land, the Tang government would, under the equal field system. Now, the Tang are going to do some things that are going to lead to its decline, but probably the worst thing they ever do is just the fact that they become very lazy. They they neglect their public officers. They're not paying attention to them because they'd rather be in the Forbidden Kingdom, playing music and messing with their women, their mistresses. Japan sitting out there, obviously influenced by China. They come across something called foot binding, and really the purpose of foot binding was to get these higher class women under male supervision. That was a status symbol for high class, was that if you had these feet that had been basically broken by foot binding, you couldn't do anything for yourself. So you were completely dependent upon a man and other people. Monasteries play a big role in societies. They were schools. And, this is Christian monasteries or Buddhist monasteries, but they were schools, medical, they gave medical care. So sort of like hospitals. They were inns, they were orphanages, they were also libraries. So they offered all these things. Of course, a couple of the guys that are famous in this time period, you get Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta. Marco Polo, of course, famous for his relationship with Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson. And then Ibn Battuta is a guy that's even more well-traveled than Marco Polo. Excuse me. But he is, he's Muslim. There are some similarities. Both of them do travel throughout Southwest Asia extensively. But other than